Hey, it's Zach with Car Tech and SA Design, and here we have a muscle car restoration. We're going to go through the disassembly phase. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is disassembly, taking this 68 Mustang. It's already been partly disassembled, so we're going to talk about what we've already done, what's still left to be done, some of the problem areas, and insider tips that you're going to get for your muscle car restoration disassembly phase.
So the very first step in disassembling a vehicle is being organized. It's fun to get into a vehicle and start tearing it down and start getting the nuts and bolts off it and you see progress, but the fact is organizing. That means you're going to prepare yourself for a lot of parts such as nuts, bolts, washers. You're going to have the bags ready so that you can label the components that come apart and come off, the clips. You're going to have a place to put them. You're going to have carts. You're going to have shelves. It's very important that you have a way of properly storing all the components of your vehicle so that you can get to them when you need them, and also so you don't lose them and then have to go back and find hard to get clips and bolts and washers and things like that several months from now when the car goes back together. So on our Mustang, we're looking at pulling the engine, transmission, suspension. So in that situation where you're going to be removing those items, we take them out as complete units or as much as possible. That eliminates the need for specialty tools. And then you have to address if you're overhauling the engine, transmission in-house, or if you're sending it out. Sometimes it's best to leave it as a complete assembly. So what we'll do is remove the engine, remove the transmission, remove the rear suspension, front suspension, as much of a unit as possible, and set those vehicles on carts and move them aside and properly store them. That way that we're not tripping over them while we're working on the vehicle. In disassembling a vehicle, the first thing we want to do after the pictures have been taken is we want to remove components. We'll move the hood, we'll move the fender left, remove the fender right, the bumpers, grill assembly, doors, trunk lid, in this case a convertible top as an assembly. We don't need to tear them in a million pieces pulling the car down. Remember, our goal going in is to get that vehicle stripped to bare metal, cleaned and epoxied. Then we can go after the assemblies and start rebuilding each component as necessary. As we continue disassembling a vehicle, you'll get to the interior. There's some people that don't need to remove the interior. For example, an original paint car that has a clean dash and no interior components need to be painted of significance, you may not have to worry about it. But in the case of removing your interior, you start by removing the seats, the carpet, the headliner, work your way down to the dash. Now with the seats out of the way, it allows you to get up underneath the dash and start unbolting the gauge assembly, cluster, moldings, pads, and the like. And it's critical that at that point you have a place to put all these pieces and that you're patient, because a lot of that is old clips and plastics you'll be dealing with. Gauges are very delicate. So again, when those parts come out, or as they come out, they're bagged, tagged, and properly stored so it's not to get crushed or damaged or lost. So we've talked about a little bit about the removing the trim, removing the assemblies, including the engine, transmission, doors, and such. Now we'll talk about removing the wiring, brake lines. You might ask, well, my brake lines are fine, the brakes work good on the vehicle, but if you're going to do a full restoration, you do get sediment buildup in your brake lines, in your fuel lines, your coolant lines, your electrical system, all get buildup of oxidation. So we want to take all those components out, assess them, and then decide whether or not we're going to replace them. In the case of our shop, for example, we automatically replace fuel lines, brake lines, and coolant lines. It's safer, it's not that expensive, and it makes for a much better restoration. Then it comes to electrical. Electrical, same thing. You take the electrical system out, you're dealing with a car that's upwards of 30, 40 years old. The wiring's done. In our case, we have the vehicle's custom wired. You might be able to go and order up loom sections for your vehicle. That's a personal preference. Regardless, you need to take the loom out as complete as you can without cutting wires, and leave the sockets, leave the clips as complete to that loom as possible, so that when you go back the other way, you have all those components to refer to, so you know how to reassemble it. And a lot of those sockets, a lot of those clips are not available, so it's imperative that you take good care of them coming out of the vehicle, properly store them, so that when you go back the other way and you're putting it back in, you haven't lost anything. This door has been already taken apart now. The clips have been removed, bagged and tagged, hinges. We look at rust damage, which looks to be mostly surface damage, so we're in good shape. We look at a little bit of rust in the inner door on the corrugated area. This corrugated panel makes it very tough to repair. So in situations like on our other door, for the opposite side, the rust is already up into this area to the point where it's easier to replace the door skin and shell as an assembly. However, on this door, it's in good enough shape to where we can carefully strip it to bare metal, epoxy it, reassemble it, and start the fitting and smoothing process.